Well, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I think the first time I met you was in Hankandi. Now we're here at the Global Baku Forum. Soon we'll be at the World Urban Forum. There's a lot going on in this country, isn't there?
Yeah, it is. Baku, Azerbaijan, they have been really, engaging globally with actually critical themes or challenges that we face, right? The COP with the climate, now this forum around multilateralism and, the context we are living in and the World Urban Forum. It's quite interesting to see what's happening here and how the country is building these bridges.
And talking of the World Urban Forum, there's so much packed into that agenda. Cities, obviously, is a big part of what's going to be discussed. Now, cities have always been the place of opportunity, the place you come to grow, to develop, to do all sorts of exciting things. But increasingly, they're also places where some of the world's mega challenges converge. Climate, issues of social cohesion, technology, equality. We all love a good conference, but how is WUF going to practically address these challenges?
I think it's quite natural that cities are playing this role because we have more than half of the population living in cities and more are coming to cities. So everything that happens at the world actually will have, cities on the front line because this is actually where people is, right? And cities, you're right, have been affected by climate. All the disasters, right, that we see, floods, also heat waves, all the related events, conflicts. We see how cities have been affected, and this is where people are and where social manifestation happens. Yeah, the World Urban Forum has become actually a central global conference for the urban community. Let's say so. So you have practitioners, you have community leaders, you have academics, that are working in cities for cities around issues related to urban development that have been coming every second year to the World Urban Forum, and this will be the 13th edition of that. And I believe they come here because, first of all, they meet. So it's a great opportunity to build partnerships. Secondly, to understand what's going on. What are the trends, right? What are the challenges? Where are the opportunities for them? And then a third, to look at practices. So what's really changing, right? And how can I learn from that? So the World Urban Forum has been the convener for this global urban community. Of course, in a practical way, you have several tracks, right? You have an exhibition where people come to showcase what they are doing. You have the academy where we have training sessions. We have the networking events where partners come together to discuss a certain topic of common interest. And we have the Practices Hub, which is an innovation now in Baku, because more and more people come to us, come to the UN, come to the World Urban Forum because they want to see what are the practices, what are the solutions that are out there.
And one group desperately looking for those solutions, I guess, would be governments. I mean, it's never been a more difficult time to govern a country with so much going on in the world, but urban populations are rising so much, aren't they? How are governments trying to keep pace with that? Are they keeping pace? Is there something that world governments need to tap into that perhaps they haven't done so far?
Yeah, of course, I have to say the housing crisis. It's also the theme of the World Urban Forum. So you see from one side, you see the urbanized regions of the world that are, and cities there that are facing many challenges in terms of homelessness, in terms of affordability. People just don't have the money to buy or rent a house. Young people or elderly to stay in a house, right? We have all the challenges of transforming the built environment to make it fit to the climate challenge, climate change. There are, many difficulties that cities in more urbanized regions are facing, but also big challenge is related to the 2 billion people that are coming to cities in the next couple of decades.
Wow.
And this influx is going to take place in Africa and Southeast Asia, 90%. We talk about cities that already face severe infrastructure gaps in terms of, basic infrastructure, access to sanitation, services, drainage, mobility, and so on. And they have now to prepare themselves to receive these hundreds of millions, almost 2 billion people that are coming to cities. Yeah.
Housing affordability, as you've just described, it seems to be a problem that globally we still haven't really got to grips with yet. I remember, for me it was London. I remember going to London, leaving university, and it was impossible to afford anywhere. So 6 or 7 of us all crammed together, rented a house, and I guess I didn't think that 30 years later it would be an even worse problem. And it just seems to me impossible for someone who's a teacher or a junior doctor or an administrator to how on earth do you make a life in cities like London, Paris or New York? I guess these are the sorts of challenges that you're going to be getting to grips with at WWOOF.
Yeah, exactly, because people need a home, right, for everything. I was talking about the Global South, where this affordability gap has been a structural issue. Now these people coming to cities, they need, first of all, a place to live. The root causes of the housing affordability and the housing issues that we are facing varies around the world, right? As I said, you have areas where you already have a robust asset of built environment. You have buildings, but people cannot access those. So there's a mismatch between supply and demand. And then you have other places where these buildings are just not there. As I said, people are still coming to cities and need to build, or high prevalence of really vulnerable conditions like informal settlements in slums, or Latin America is an example of that, or Asia, where you have large cities with large proportion of population living there. I think the dimension now and the difference now is that this crisis became global. Now the difficulties to access a house is a common denominator almost everywhere. And it is mostly felt at the city level at the end of the day. As you said, cities and local governments, local authorities, they are at the front line because they are the ones who have to deal with this contingent coming and the deficit of infrastructure. Very complex because they need the money, they need the laws and the regulations that come from the national government. So you're right. Governments, are really in this complex environment where the problem is only rising and rising in a context of uncertainty, of economic uncertainty, of climate uncertainty. And to deal with the problem, you need to overcome silos because it's not enough to build houses. Once you build anything, you are building a city, you're building a neighborhood, so you have to make sure that you build right, well located, connected to services, right?
And I guess value chains are so interlinked now that this notion of collaborating, solving problems together, it's not just a trite conference platform statement, it's the only way that these things can be solved.
It's the only way. I've been talking about a systemic change needed because it's not just, having the construction materials and having the piece of land. First of all, having the piece of land is a difficult thing. Second, the materials also difficult because there's context of inflation and so on. And exactly right now, we don't know what's going on with prices in the near future. But basically, you need new systems. You need to change, how you plan the cities. You need to plan cities for people. Yes. You need to plan cities for nature. You need to plan cities in a way that everybody understands, that people can participate, right? the money that is available, the financial systems, they have to work for the need. So you need to have the calibrated, incentives, subsidies, and so on to bridge this affordability gap. Because if you don't have, you will not be able to bridge this affordability gap. At the same time, you have financial flows that goes into real estate, but doesn't, really reach, the bottom of the population. So clearly, the systems are not working, so what we need is a systemic change, actually, and a more holistic view of the challenge.
I know at UN Habitat you have a tremendous amount of expertise, but you're also a learning organisation, a listening organisation too. What is it that you've learnt particularly from countries, cities recovering from conflict and war, and how can that insight be turned into some of these solutions that we so badly need?
Yeah, well, ironically, reconstruction and recovery also presents an opportunity of changing systems, changing the way you plan, changing the laws, changing the regulation, changing the configuration, right? So one thing that we keep repeating is you have to build back better, right? So it's like a common say, and it's an opportunity for reinvention. And we see cases, and we are here in Azerbaijan, where this is happening in a different way than it happened in the past, yeah.
And as I said at the start, there's a lot happening, not just in this country, but in this region. When you look at South Caucasus, Central Asia, what's happening in Azerbaijan, the connections to Europe, do you feel positive about the ability of those countries to work together to solve some of these problems?
No, I feel there are valuable experiences here, and I feel there is a growing demand, to look at the systems and things that are not working and to review, right? So I think this region, can contribute to the global challenge in this, double way, because you have practices that can be shared, right? And on the other hand, there is this appetite for also reviewing what's not working and being connected to the trends that are out there. I mean, the fact that this country is hosting the World Urban Forum and just hosted the COP, like the two largest UN conferences, reveals, that there's an appetite for bridging this knowledge and this expertise, yeah.
And just finally, looking ahead to WUF 13, how will we know that we've done a good job? What signs do you expect, are you hoping for emerging out of the event that will signal that things are going in a positive direction?
Well, first of all, I hope people leave WUF 13 happy with the outcomes and they respond positively to the survey. So I'm looking forward to listening to their opinion, the participants. But I think to be very concrete and related to our agenda, we have a couple of opportunities ahead. This year we celebrate 10 years of the New Urban Agenda that was endorsed by member states in Quito, Ecuador in 2016. We have 10 more years to go. So WUF 13 will be a great moment for stock taking. We are going to review the New Urban Agenda at its midterm in New York in July under the General Assembly. So we really hope that we have a strong Baku call to action, but also a strong debate among ministers that are going to come together and leaders are going to come together, and that inputs helps us to look back, but also look at what are the priorities and what's possible to be done in the next 10 years. We are also facilitating another very relevant intergovernmental process. UN Habitat has, a variety of ways to support the urban agenda. One critical way is the normative work that we do. So we work with member states to identify guidance, to identify policy recommendations on how to deal with the housing crisis. And there's an intergovernmental process ongoing, the open-ended working group on housing. Actually, Azerbaijan, together with Somalia, are co-chairing the work of this open-ended working group this year. And we expect to capture valuable inputs from the discussions, from the debates, but also practices and experiences that we can then feed, into the work of the working group, and help us to support member states in shaping policy recommendations to overcome the housing challenges.
Well, look, it's been a great pleasure speaking to you. Thank you very much for your time, and we look forward to catching up again in May at WOOF 13. Thank you.
For sure, this is becoming a tradition now. Thank you.